Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in. Happy New Year. This is the PWTorch Fireside Chat for January 5th, 2023. I wasn't going to mess that. I was not going to mess that up today. What's going on, everybody? Thanks for being here. First Fireside Chat of the new year. Tyler, man, what's going on, man? Happy New Year.
Struggling with my hat. I apologize. Struggling with my hat here.
Come on, man. Yeah, get together over there.
Keep the name down because I want to make sure I look good for everyone here. I look like Jerry Garcia. I can't zoom in very much, but I have a Grateful Dead album back there, so I'm really channeling my Jerry Garcia vibes.
There's worse, icons that you could look like. So.
For sure, that's the 2023 vibes. Is without the death, obviously, is the Jerry Garcia.
Well, yes. This is true. This is true. Well, man, it's good to be here. Everybody in the chat, thanks for joining us. Everybody watching us live, not in the chat, thanks for joining us. We got a pretty newsworthy show here. Lots of stuff to talk about the last handful of days, and just thank you for being a part of the PWTorch YouTube channel. We had a big year in 2022, and we're going to have an even bigger one in 2023. So appreciate you being here. If you haven't clicked subscribe, please do. We've got some really cool content coming up here in the last couple days. Tyler, you braved the early morning hours and watched Wrestle Kingdom. That was fun for me to watch when I woke up the next morning to kind of just watch along with the watch along, as I had to catch the show late unexpectedly. But so you guys can check that out. We've got a brand new interview with Josh Alexander up on the day that he became the longest reigning Impact World Champion of all time. He sat down. We got to talk a little bit about that and some other things. So that and a whole slew of other things. But subscribe if you haven't done so. We certainly appreciate it. Go ahead.
And I saw you have a great interview coming up. You don't have to say what it is, but I saw it obviously in our StreamYard. It's queued up, ready to go. So that, if you're gonna get anyone in Impact, Alexander is one to get. But I think this one, for me personally, would be even more of a must-see viewing experience. I haven't seen it yet, but someone that I'm a big fan of, so I'm excited to see that one.
I am too. Keep an eye on the YouTube channel tomorrow for news on that, guys. But some cool things happen. So thanks for being a part of it, Tyler. You what is it like to be live on YouTube at 4 a.m?
It's fine. It's more I had to do a different setup, so I wasn't like this is like my room. Not to give you like a full doxing of my home, but this room is next to my bedroom. So, me at 4 a.m. trying to, direct traffic and give opinions on wrestling, have wrestling playing. So I had to move downstairs to the standee room. So that was fun to do it like 4:15 in the morning and then to get on there. Yeah, it was fine. But, you can tell even if you want to watch Tyler look like kind of what the closest thing to drunk you'll see probably on this podcast, unless it's like a late night watch along, is me being like, Javier and Brian from the Torch. I want to make sure I plug them. They're great. They're very much more experts in New Japan than I am. So I'm like, all right, tell me what happened, and then they'll like repeat it. I'd be like, oh wow, where's Shingo? And then Javier would be like, I told you, man, he was in the Rumble early. I was like, oh yeah, okay, I remember now. So it was a good time. We hit the big 3 matches, I would say, the junior heavyweight 4-way, and then the 2 main events, which, the Kenny and Ospreay is appointment viewing. And then I would say the Okada and Jay White match is one of the more interesting main events of Wrestle Kingdom history as far as, I've probably seen 7 of the 17 now live, and very interesting. So you can go see our live reactions there and all about that. But,
it's good stuff. It really is. Check it out if you haven't done so already. But so coming out of Wrestle Kingdom, we're definitely going to hit some Wrestle Kingdom stuff. But we typically start with AEW, so let's stick with that. Being in that, it's kind of what we do. So normally maybe we do New Year, new schedule, but let's just talk AEW for a minute. So I think last night was a good show overall for like just collectively. I thought the matches were good. I thought the crowd was great. I thought the stage and stuff looked fine, looked good. The biggest piece of news coming out of that, though, was MJF, Bryan Danielson. They're going to have a match at Revolution, maybe, and it might be a 60-minute Iron Man match if they have it. But Bryan Danielson has to run the gauntlet. Has to go 5-0 in his next 5 match, or is it 5? I think so. 5 or 6. 4. Okay, 4. And so it brings up the notion of like, once again, we're in this place with MJF where it's like a gauntlet of sorts. And yesterday they tried to be like, this is different than the trials of MJF, even though it's very much the exact same thing. Tyler, I'll throw to you first. I mean, what do you think of Danielson versus MJF in an Iron Man match for the title as the next pay-per-view main event at Revolution? And B, and maybe even more importantly, like, what do you think of this direction again with the MJF character in terms of who gets to fight him and who doesn't?
Yeah, so the match itself, I think, it's a feud that makes sense if you want to have this be an epic MJF run and he's not wrestling very often, and you're going to have him be the champion through, let's say, the next 3 pay-per-views, I think, at a minimum, right? I think we have this one, probably have him at Double or Nothing, and then All In 2023 is probably the first time I would consider him even having the option of losing, obviously, because you may, if any of the contract stuff is real, I think it feels more work than real at this point. And I think you tend to agree, but let me know if you don't. But then that you could pull the trigger there, or it'll ultimately finish at Revolution. You can make it look like he is leaving and have him lose to somebody there and have that person be the triumphant or Full Gear 2023. And they could be the champion of AEW that saved the belt from that menace who's going to the other company, right? That can be the story in the long run. So if you have that, if you have 4 major opponents for this year, Danielson's obviously one of them. That is a no-brainer, right? And he's already gone through Moxley. So that's fine to me. And Danielson's pretty open. He doesn't want to win. He doesn't need to win the title. He just wants to wrestle and be, in spots. So, all that stuff is good and bad. It's good for me. I understand as a wrestling consumer that this is not going to be the end of MJF's run. So, the journey should be relatively fun. We get to see, Danielson and Takeshita next week. Should be an awesome match. Yeah. I mean, he made Tony Nese look better than he's ever looked, I think, on American cable television last night in 4 minutes. So, I think all that is positive, knowing everything I just stated there, right? But the journey is the issue. Talked about it last time in the post show a little bit. And I know you feel a little differently, so I'm excited to your opinion there. But, I think the MJF character and MJF, the human being, thinks that being doing the same thing over and over again, doing the same type of promo, and doing the same way to book his big pay-per-view matches of having his opponent have to go through a gauntlet to get there is indicative of him. I think he probably likes to have that, like in 20 years when someone has an MJF build to their feud, he's probably going to like that's named after him, just like Dusty Rhodes loved things being called the Dusty Finish, as we saw last night as well. And and not wrestling and calling it out, I think all that in his mind is how he gets over as a heel to people like me and you and people watching a show like this, that beyond him calling all of us lard asses and saying that his opponent's moms had human suitors with goats, which is the strangest term I've ever heard for having sex with, which is insane. Hopefully that combo is long enough for this transcript, not for us to get banned for saying those two things so close together. So I apologize.
Yes.
But all that being said, that's the surface level heel thing that he loves doing. And then this, I think, is his more someone who's very involved and has always been part of the internet wrestling culture as he's younger than both of us even. So he's even more ingrained with it, that he doesn't have that before and after, I think you and I do, of the last golden era of you could read Wade or you could read Dave and kind of know what's going on. But if you were, 10 or 12 like us, it just all felt actually real a little bit for a period of time, like Santa is, if any kids are watching. But yeah, so all that, I think, and that's the segue here. I'm sorry if I'm going on a diatribe here, but I've gotten a lot of messages. One person, Ryan, is watching right now, where he sent a question in, and a handful of other people I really trust in wrestling that are not, Torch affiliated at this moment, but all of them, they're not people that interact with each other besides me, and they're all texting me this MJF character is stale. I'm over this. I'm tired of this same set up to these builds and this character's not working for me, etc. One way, shape, or the other. But like I'm talking like 4 different people are sending this to me independently of, you know, probably heard me on the show last night and wanted to get their opinion in. But I think that is a problem. And I said this last night, so I'll be kind of quick if you watch or listen to the post show. But I just think like it's not a problem now for the general audience. I think like post Danielson at Revolution, I think that it's going to be a problem for that character if his next opponent and they do the same thing again, that it's going to be like all these MJF segments are exactly the same. It's going to feel like the first 10-minute promo you get on Raw every week. And it's going to be kind of that effect of, yeah, it's great. Raw has more viewers, but like that product feels very monotonous and not in a good way. And I think that's what the MJF character is to a fault. And, you know, I'm open to changing that if this is like a swerve of some sort where the next opponent has a different build. But if it's the same build over and over again just to get heat for people like me, that is getting heat with me, but I think that is negative heat long-term for a character and for a company. So just something to pinpoint there. But the one last question that you asked, do I think the match will be good? I'm higher on it than I think most people are in this space that kind of feel like me about the monotony of MJF. I think this match is going to be an absolute banger. And I think MJF will prove it in the match that, you know, it's worth waiting 2 months to see him wrestle and do an hour with Danielson. I think there's almost no question about that. But also, like, check your calendars. If you work, there's not a holiday on Monday. So take a half day if you can on Monday, March 6th, if you live on the East Coast, because that thing is easily going until, you know, 12:15, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, so, God, you don't think they're going to have the same number of matches, do you?
Oh, come on. I mean, I will lay odds for anybody, and I will take the money personally and hold it. But yeah, they're going to have 12 matches, 2 pre-show matches, whatever it's going to be. It's going to pre-show starts at 7. The thing starts proper at 8 Eastern time. It's going to be over at, you know, the main event will start at 11:45, and it'll be over at 12:45, 1 o'clock.
Man, I mean, that would be
in that. I can guarantee you that's the layout. If anything, I'm good at AEW is guessing Tony Khan layouts. And that's it.
Yeah, right. Well, Bryant just tossed in the ratings.
Okay.
864,000 and a 0.26.
Because we missed last week. Did you see what that was for reference? I did not.
I didn't. The holidays threw off all the reporting last week, so I don't know what. And I admittedly was away, so I didn't see much of that. But either way, I mean, I think anything 800,000, I think is going to not be great for the show. But at the same time, you know, you didn't have like a slew. You had some really solid matches on the show this week for sure. But you know, the Elite wasn't wrestling. John Moxley wasn't wrestling. Paige wasn't wrestling. MJF wasn't wrestling. Bryan Danielson was wrestling. Tony Nese. So it's like, I think it just was like a B or C level episode of Dynamite that was good, and that's fine. Next week's the big one, though. Next week's the one where you want to see them in the high 900s. I think for that to be, you know, to be a success. I'll comment on MJF in a minute, but go ahead on the rating.
Yeah. Well, how'd you know that I found it? Am I that obvious when I'm scrolling on my computer?
Oh no, I tossed it up there. What Bryant had it.
I looked at last week too. So
okay.
Was 876 and a 0.28, so pretty flat, I would say in general with the holiday week, which is not ideal. But yeah, I agree 100%. Like we were doing the live stream, and Brian from the Torch was very like he was like, "Oh, this can be a huge show." And I was like, I don't know, man. There's like, I like Ricky Starks and I like Darby in Seattle, but it felt very much like a stepping stone intermediate show for a big show, right? It's going to be like, you know, like the last week's episode was pretty big. This week's episode on paper it seemed good, but not like a huge pay-per-view like episode like next week is. And I think the following week after next week will be kind of the same way. You'll save something for that main event, but it's not going to feel anything as close to the importance of what next week's episode of Dynamite is going to feel like. So
exactly. I think you want that, like generally speaking. You just want, like, you're not going to be able to have shows like next week every single week. Like that's too much to ask. What you want to eventually do is just like for these low shows, like that 868 or whatever, you want that to be 910 or 925, you know, and then pop over 1 million when you have something big. That's what they haven't grown. And we'll see. Next week's a big one. That's a big show. That's got a lot of heavy artillery on it, and we'll get to that when we get to that. But in regards to MJF, I think So, I honestly, I think I'm with you overall. The big picture, I'm with you. Like zooming in on last night and this angle in particular, I'm fine with this for a couple different reasons. One being, like, we're still at a point where MJF, in my mind, like, still needs to, like, he's a heel, right? Like, and so I think he still needs to be that right now to just make sure that fans are conditioned to know that that's what he is. Like, no funny business, like, continue to take everything away from his character that people were drawn to, the witty kind of comments. Like, it's an interesting time because he's coming off this run where he was like this hot babyface that people wanted to see, and Tony Khan decided, okay, we're gonna make him a heel. We'll go in that direction. And so now I think you have to continue to lean on that until you're sure that you've got it in the right place. Because the worst thing that can happen is, especially in this instance with Danielson, that MJF starts to get cheers again. And so I think this is a good card to play because it's heelish to the audience out there that is not us, in this room right now. In that, MJF's being an annoying asshole, right? Like, and his 5 more matches, like, okay, he's such a whatever, like, heel. I don't like that guy. For the people in this room, it's like, oh man, again with this nonsense. So it kind of plays in both ways. Now, so for that reason, I'm good with it right now. It gets some heat now, which they need. But you're totally right. Like, looking into the future for MJF, this can't be an every single time thing. Like, it just can't be. And I think this is probably the last time you can pull it off successfully. Like, if they're going around the corner and whoever he's going to wrestle at Double or Nothing, and they're in the same boat, it's going to get boring. And it's not because it's not getting heat. I'm sure it will, but does it get heat that draws money? That's the question. And that's what I think kind of hangs in the balance here. Like, if this is something that is going to be a long-term thing where, somebody down the road gets over as a babyface because he completely squashes this concept in front of MJF, who's just like, hey, no, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going through 5 anything. I talked to Tony Khan. We're wrestling on this date at this time. Like, that's a babyface move that you could play opposite MJF. But either way, like, Bryan Danielson, what I don't like about this instance in particular is to be in contention for a world title shot, you probably have to win 4 or 5 matches in a row anyway. So it's like, it's not like this isn't some like big thing for MJF. Like, that's the problem with the story. Before, it was like MJF's trials. Like, I'm picking this stuff. You're not gonna, and this is just like, oh, you gotta just win. Well, it's like, well, yeah, of course. If you lose to Takeshita next week, obviously you shouldn't really be in line for a title shot. So it's got holes. But I'm sympathetic just because of where MJF is as a character. But if this continues to be like a crutch for him, they gotta go to the drawing board and find a new way for people to get at him. He's not like, like he's on an episodic television show. Like, it can't be the same story over and over and over again. I agree with you on that. But in this instance, I kind of give it a thumbs up just because all they have to do with him to get him to the right place.
Yeah, that's why I like talking to you about it last night. I think the segment itself worked for a couple ways. It was entertaining, like, right? Like, if you can't, is it the greatest thing long term for those guys to be joking about, MJF's mom sleeping with everybody in the arena? Probably not. But it feels more like, DX Attitude Era style, which is like what people say they want, and then when it happens, they don't like it. So, it's always an interesting take for majority of people. But are you reading that Wall Street Journal story too?
I'm looking it up.
That's what I did. I looked it up, so we definitely got a segue to that because it's. I think unfortunately I was right a couple weeks ago. So I don't love to bask in that, but you can read that. But yeah, so that being said, and the big key thing, and you mentioned it for me with MJF is, and obviously they're in Seattle. It's Bryan Danielson territory. But like MJF is universally getting booed everywhere he's going to in, the last 6 weeks. And that's coincided with the uptick, in my opinion, of AEW, their direction, all that stuff. There's not weird middling going on with lots of characters. Swerve's a heel. He's done messing around in that spot. MJF's a heel. He's done messing around, helping Moxley and the Ricky Starks. They're committing to him as a big babyface character, etc. So in the on paper, I like the idea of this sort of segment. It works independently of other MJF things.
Yes.
It's a thing that it's the totality of it, right? It's like if you had Stone Cold every 3 months come out in a car shooting some sort of liquid at somebody, right? It would get overdone, and he's doing like a parody of himself, right? And that's why a lot of characters do it. I think that's why Chris Jericho is always referenced by modern wrestlers of how to like reinvent yourself and not be a caricature of yourself. And I think MJF is being a caricature of himself, again, just to get heat with the right amount of people, the very small percentage, probably 2 to 5% of the viewing audience that can notice that. And that's not really getting you much, except if there's people who are watching this on delay or whatever that are like, oh, wow, that's a good point. I didn't, whatever, which is fine. Like me and you live, eat, and breathe wrestling stuff. So it's our job to overanalyze everything. But yeah, that Vince story is something, huh?
Oh yeah, we'll get to that in like 2 seconds. I want to just make one final comment on this. So I think this is, I want to there's nuance to my argument, because I think this is a good thing for the story, and I think it is what MJF needs right now. This is the problem with not going with him as babyface, because you end up feeling like you have to play tricks like down the road to get to where you want him to be, where a babyface MJF would have just been more natural given what the crowd was giving him. And now you're relying on these things like, oh, well, let's do that 5 matches business because we know nobody likes that. Like that'll get booed big time. And it's just like, I don't think you want to book that way. It's hard to book that way. Like you don't want to ask Vince McMahon. We'll talk about him in a minute. Like he spent years playing those kind of games with Roman Reigns to make sure that he got cheered. And it's like, you're going to get into a situation where you're like Timothy. And Timothy, thanks for joining us. Kind of tired of MJF. Every promo is just him screaming as loud as possible. It's cringy. Yeah, you just don't want that. And Sean's coming in here disagreeing. Yeah, I disagree, guys. The booking is the bad part. This is about Jade. Okay. Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute, Sean.
There's a good Jade discourse.
Yes, there is. Okay, I got it. Got it. All right, well, we got to pause. I don't know what it is about this show, man, but we crack the mics and Vince McMahon news gets dropped. It's pretty unbelievable. This is, I think, the 3rd time now this is something like this has happened.
Yeah, the original story was a Thursday at 4. Yep. Him retiring was a Friday at 4.
Friday at 4.
This is a Thursday at 4.
And now the comeback.
Yeah.
The comeback.
We're going to rebrand the Vince McMahon corporate backroom dealing succession podcast.
Yes. So, all right. Well, I'll give a rundown of what is afoot here. 22 minutes ago, the Wall Street Journal ran an article, and the headline is Vince McMahon plots return to WWE. Majority owner intends to come back to pursue a sale of the business. So it's we'll get it up at PWTorch.com very, very soon. But basically, I'll just read the first paragraph. Vince McMahon, the majority owner and former executive of World Wrestling Entertainment, plans to return to the company following his retirement last year amid a sexual harassment scandal to pursue a sale of the business, according to people familiar with the matter. Mr. McMahon, who has a majority voting power through his ownership of WWE's Class B stock, has told the company that he is electing himself and 2 former co-presidents and directors, Michelle Wilson and George Barrios, to the board. The people said the move to reinstate Mr. McMahon, which the board previously rebuffed, and the others will require 3 current directors to vacate their position. I'm going to scroll here a little bit and let's see. Okay. This is about a couple paragraphs down. Mr. McMahon believes the media landscape is evolving quickly and more companies are looking into own the intellectual property they use on their streaming platforms, making WWE an attractive takeover target. People said WWE, which generates most of its revenue from selling content rights, posted its first $1 billion year revenue in 2021, and the current market for the company is just over $5 billion. So, man, this is interesting. I mean, this is interesting. So my first thought here is this mentions nothing about him running the day-to-day operations of WWE, like on a creative perspective, creative front. So I think that's something to keep in mind as we discuss this, and as just stuff goes around. Like, this doesn't say, hey, he wants to come in and be the CEO. Like, that's not what I'm reading here. Again, I'm reading this for the first time out loud right now, so I have to obviously do a deep dive. It doesn't not say that either. But at the same time, man, Vince McMahon's presence, in that company is just, I don't think, a positive thing for perception. Even if the sexual misconduct, sexual assault allegations were not around, he just has not been like a positive note for that company in quite some time. So him trying to get it back into the fold is really interesting. And then, I mean, a sale of the company, with that being the goal, and he owning the majority of that Class B stock, I mean, ultimately, that's going to be his call. And so, that's real interesting to digest. I'm kind of rambling, but I'll throw to you to ramble for a little bit. I mean, it's it's not surprising in some ways, but I think it's the reason for his return is surprising, because Vince McMahon always felt like, to me, he'd be a guy that you'd have to pry the company out of his cold, dead hands. And so to see him come back to sell it is a bit interesting for me.
Well, like I said, I try not to toot my own horn a lot, but I would just keep in mind that I've been pretty correct throughout this whole time. And you have too. It's not like you've really debated me on anything here. So, but what I am inferring here, this is my thoughts, just reading this immediately while we're on air, right? You were talking about MJF, and I scrolled over and read this. If you're going to retake over your company, that's a publicly traded company, and you're going to change out 3 board members to get yourself voted back in, saying something like, my goal is to sell the company and I'm the majority share owner, I need to be there to make that decision correctly, is something that you would say. And then if you don't sell it, hey, there's no good offer. Sorry about that. But hey, I'm in charge now. I got the new board.
Yeah.
That is almost certainly what I think is happening here. If there is a sale, if there's a offer he cannot refuse, I think that has been on the table since before he was out, right? We were talking about that in April when we started the show, right? And with all the cuts, that's what it seemed like they were doing. They were making stuff look viable for a sale. If they get a great TV deal, a better one than they have currently, they're probably not going to sell. And if they don't, then you're probably going to sell before these laps or whatever, right? You give it all to NBC, you can have all the rights and do what they want with it, right? So, but I think this is almost certainly Vince coming back into power. And he's not saying create. You perfectly said it. That's why I nodded along with you. It doesn't say he's not wanting to be a creative. Vince McMahon is a weed in WWE, and as long as he's around, I think there's always potential for him to be there and muddle and negatively impact that company like he did before he left. And unfortunately, this is like a total vibe killer for me to hear this news, because I've liked WWE since he's left. I've liked the small changes that Triple H has done and the booking pattern, and I've been very excited for this Rumble and WrestleMania season, and this is putting a damper on it. And I just think we'll see. I think the best case would be for it to sell, and then who knows? Even that, though, if it sells and he's not the person, the CEO, then why would he not do creative as well as part of the negotiation, right? So I think no matter what, you have to have your base case be here that within 4 to 6 months, Vince is running creative again for WWE. And if that does not happen, I think we're all better for it and we should be thankful. But I just think we all need to mentally prepare ourselves that we're kind of going to go back. And, I was looking through tweets while you were talking there too. And Sean Ross Sapp is very tied in, and he said that many high up executives in WWE were very clear with him that they did not want Vince to come back in any capacity. And, there's going to be shakeups in jobs, people brought back, et cetera. So it's a depressing day for people's jobs, their careers, so I'm basically foregone conclusion Vince is back in my mind. And I think the selling of it is as likely as it was before he left, unfortunately, is my take.
It's hard to disagree with that. I mean, there's the ramifications of this, like of a Vince comeback, really in any capacity. And I'll read another paragraph here that I think is interesting. The 77-year-old sent a letter to WWE's board in late December detailing his desire to return to the company he ran for 4 decades to help spearhead a strategic review process. Mr. McMahon believes there is a narrow window to kick off a sales process because WWE's media rights, including for his flagship programs Raw and Smackdown, are about to be renegotiated. That is interesting because, if I guess it really depends on how you look at this news. Like if you take everything for face value and you're just like, okay, Vince McMahon is a majority shareholder and he wants to sell the company. I mean, say what you want about Vince McMahon, a lot to say. That's within his right to do. He owns the company. Like, okay, that's his decision. To me, and if you take that at face value, to me that says that like the owner of this company, like maybe is not confident in what those media rights fees may look like. Like if he's looking at ratings or he, whatever, doing his due diligence and is going, well, if we can't get $1 billion for SmackDown again, like that's going to be a big problem. If we can't get close to $1 billion for Raw again, like that's a big problem. And this is a way to kind of alleviate that problem by just going, you know what, forget it. Here you go, NBC. You just take all of it. And so I think that's an interesting, it's a real interesting play because for so long, even me, like I'll be surprised if it goes that way because like I still think TV and those networks still are trying to hang on, which means paying big money for shows they know are going to get strong ratings. And and Raw's ratings have gone down. We know this, but they're still top 5, usually all 3 hours, top 5, with adults 18 to 49. There's value there. But as we've talked about on the show before, at some point that value goes away where it's like, we don't care about that anymore. So we're going a different direction. And so it's really interesting to see that as like a focus of this story. If you take it the other direction though, and your way, and you're like, yeah, this is just a way for Vince to get back. I mean, like, we all talk about the awfulness of Vince McMahon, and I'll pull up some comments from our live audience here in a minute. But like, this is like next level awfulness. This is like sacrificing his own company just to get back in the driver's seat. And not only that, but the career of his daughter and the career of his son-in-law, and like that's just it's such a Vince McMahon move in almost every way that it's hard to sit here and go, oh, that's just unbelievable. But like, even if it's not a surprising thing that somebody like that would do, like I have 2 daughters, right? I can't functionally imagine like trying to sabotage them in any way, let alone on that kind of a level.
Yeah. But like you said, I can just picture the, whatever.
I know.
The WWE approved documentary about the alpha maleness of Vince McMahon narrated by Andrew Tate, some bullshit like that. I can see that.
Yes.
In the future, so it's like,
oh my God.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just like, that's what I warned about, before. It's just like, as long as he's alive, he's like, there's a potential there. And he doesn't care about anything but him and his company, right? That is his child. That's the love of his life. That is his whole thing. He's the guy who, works 100+ hours a week on the thing. To think that he was just going to walk away quietly was, I think fraught, but we're hopeful there was enough things in line, it being a public company, et cetera, that would keep it there. But yeah, I just I it feels like a Trojan horse to me. I hope I'm wrong, but I think even if I am wrong, I think the next thing is like if they were to sell, let's say, to NBC, right, or whoever, Disney, I don't know, whatever, Fox, whoever you want to think of, like, do you think that they're going to choose as lay people, as media lay people who do not watch wrestling, don't know anything about the current landscape? Do you really think, I think the allegations might hurt him, but like if you're going to get a pitch, like I think their first choice would be Vince McMahon to run creative, not Triple H. So that's another thing.
Yeah. I mean, the allegations may hurt him there. I think, that's where I think it may hurt him most is that, okay, yeah, Vince, you can come back and you can make sure the company gets sold and you can cash out and you can do all these things. But does NBC want to have that guy with those allegations running that company for them? I mean, I would say no, but I mean, certainly worse things have.
Yeah, I mean, look at as an example, right? I'm sorry to cut you off, but like Dana White is, he slapped his wife on New Year's Eve, right? That whole thing's going on right now. And Disney owns or is partners with UFC, which is owned by, do you know the operating company? I forget.
It's like, I think, is it the WME group? Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But like White he sold it, and then he's like, that's like the Vince model, I would guess, right? Is like if they sell it and like that has still worked. I mean, not like morally, right? Or not, but
yeah. Well, and Dana White's a lot younger than Vince, though, too.
Yeah. But like he's the guy who's the face of the company, right? And then they kept him, and then they've kept deals, and they've gotten better deals, right? So I think, unfortunately, I'm not like advocating for any of this. I think we're all kind of on the same page here that Vince sucks and is horrible. But like there are precedents and people that like to make money and they just like, hey, Dana White is UFC, Vince McMahon is wrestling. And I think that, it's more likely that he gets back in, doesn't sell, keeps running things. But if he sells it, I think it's, even more than 50% chance. So
that is it. It is it's fascinating. I mean, it's fascinating. Like, and there's so many things that like this. Well, first of all, too, he brings back George Barrios, Michelle Wilson, like two of his like lieutenants that he kind of ruthlessly let go to pivot on strategy, to pivot on content strategy. Barrios and Wilson were reportedly, the two touting like the WWE network strategy, owning their own streaming content and creating new content, watch hours, that kind of thing. And then of course, Nick Khan obviously came in and changed that and licensed it all out. But now they're back, and it's such a story because Vince McMahon is Vince McMahon, and the guy is just, I don't know, he's just so incredibly ruthless. Let me drop in a few comments here because I think it's pretty it's universal. Like there's not one person going, hey, you know what? I think this is a good move. Tracy jumping in. He's just so horrible. Plain and simple. The feds should just indict Vince. I'm not sure you can do that, Bryant, without some evidence of some kind, but maybe you can. Sean, hey, it's pretty horrible. Azan going, hey, NBC's pulling up the trucks. WWE headquarters could be. I mean, that would be a partner that makes sense at this point because they've got so much invested in them already as far as like, Peacock and Raw. So that would make a lot of sense. This one cracked me up.
I was like, yeah, put that one up. I mean, that to me,
so ridiculous. This is the funniest possible outcome. Poor William Regal. Come on, Vince, from Derek. His selfishness is shining through at a different level. Why is he consumed with killing or damaging what he created? Well, I think that's part of Vince McMahon. I don't think clearly, Derek, he doesn't think of it that way. He thinks I need to come back to make sure this company sells for $5 billion, or so this article says. He doesn't see it as like, obviously as him being like this this terrible piece of news. Joel coming in here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to relax.
That's your talking point for the next couple of days.
Yes.
I also think it's interesting, Zahn here, kind of related, but I didn't know that Power Slap show got canned, and I checked it did. So,
that's good anyway.
I mean, you can't have him slapping then have a show called Power Slap on TV. So that's pretty low hanging fruit of basicness, but.
And I think that whatever. That's just such a terrible thing, and it's on video, and it's disgusting on video, and it's so. Power Slap be damned. And also it was a bad idea anyway. I agree with Joel on this. Bad call, even without this. Even if Dana White was the sweetest angel that we know he isn't. Power Slap, not a good idea. Anyway, so all right, Tyler, I've been typing out some questions here to help drive this discussion. Stephanie McMahon is still the CEO. McMahon is still the co-CEO. Like, what offense can you play back on this? Like, the problem they have is that Vince owns the company. Like, so he can do whatever he wants. He doesn't need any authority to pull what he's pulling. I don't know the inner workings of Wall Street enough to speak to like on a grand scale, but when you look at this, if you're Stephanie and you're Paul Levesque, I mean, I'm sure they're not thrilled, but they have a good track record, I think, right now, of running the company in a way that they're not Vince McMahon. The company still made a lot of money. They have, I think, more goodwill than they've had in quite some time. Ratings are essentially they're down, but they're not down abnormal amounts. And so they've got a lot to stand on as far as having like run the company without Vince for a handful of months here. At the same time, it's only been a handful of months. This is not like it's a year-long process. So I don't know. I'll throw to you. You're Triple H. You're Stephanie McMahon. What conversation are you having at the dinner table tonight?
Well,
God damn that old man.
Yeah, you're using logic to like argue this from their perspective, which I think is fraught. Not
true.
Not that your points are fraught, but it's not going to work with essentially negotiating with the terrorist, corporate terrorist here in Vince McMahon, I would say, for lack of a better term. But if you want to like combat this at all, I mean, again, I haven't thought about this. I'm sure that both of them have known this was incoming. It makes a lot of sense why Triple H hasn't changed like a ton of things here, because it's been a long time. He's brought people back, but the show feels relatively the same, right? I mean, not that there's like, if you're a casual viewer, you didn't know that the creative change, you might be like, oh yeah, it's like seems a little fresher. They're changing things up than what they did, like not just an opening, promo every Raw open, whatever. But like, I think they probably knew that this was always a possibility on the table, and they are playing the, hey, keep us around. We did a good job while you're gone, and we were doing it for you, Lord, and they genuflect in front of him corporately. But like, if you want to, Joel,
Joel, you're killing us.
Okay, so we'll talk about that too. But I think the only way, if you wanted to like fight this, if you're Triple H and Stephanie, is like, you have to, you've got 3 people new on the board here, and you have to somehow try and flip everyone not named Vince McMahon that got added to that board. Whatever promise you make them, like, hey, if you do not vote him on, we will guarantee you this position, which I think is illegal in corporate structures. But I'm sure Vince has done the same thing, and that is also illegal, to be like, hey, I'm getting your job back. I'll give you a pay increase. I'll give you a percentage of the company when it sells, whatever, right? There's probably some promises made on Vince's front to get him back on there. So you got to kind of get down in the mud and play that way. If you want to combat this, you have to block him in this voting process, or else I think you have no really other foot to stand on, and you're at his will once more. So
yeah, and man, I mean,
but then Vince would just take him off the board and do it.
I was just going to say that Vince would just take him off the board. I mean,
so you're in a bad spot.
Right. You're in a bad spot either way. let's talk like what's gonna kind of fly under the radar, I think, with this news of Vince coming back is the fact that like his intention, according to this report by the Wall Street Journal anyway, is to sell the company. That's something that it's like Mercedes Mone in AEW. I'll believe it when I see it, but same thing here. Like it was just one of those things where I was like, I'll believe Vince McMahon selling the company when it happens. This is some big news towards that direction. I mean, like, I think if you're going to sell WWE, if you're a WWE fan and you want as much consistency as you can possibly have from McMahon-owned WWE to NBC or Fox-owned WWE, Paul Levesque is a central figure, I think, to making that transition, work best. Like not Vince McMahon in that Dana White role, but Paul Levesque in that Dana White role, and maybe Stephanie, on the business side of it. Or maybe not. She has less to do, I think, with the day-to-day product than Paul Levesque does. That said, even if that happens, though, it's not the same company in a lot of ways. It's not like, the chain of command goes all sorts of different directions. When you're in that type of situation, ask Eric Bischoff. Like, it's not as simple as, okay, well, let's just ask Vince or let's just ask Stephanie. Like it gets complicated. Like when you look into the crystal ball and either with Triple H still involved or Vince still involved and whatever, just your thoughts on a WWE that's not, owned by the McMahons and it's owned by a bigger conglomerate. Like it can be better. It can be not as good either, depending on, who's making the ultimate final calls on certain topics and certain strategies.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's pros and cons to it, so it's hard to say like definitively one way or the other, and we're just projecting, right? I think there's, the pros is that it could change for the better. It could get a facelift from what it's been for so long, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there things have been positive, but there's lots of easy changes on that show and the formatting and how they present things and just their overall structure and all that sort of stuff, which we could, get into. I don't think this is the format to do it, but the negative would be like that they could get canceled. Like you could cancel Raw.
Yeah, dude, you're not kidding, right?
Like if it's not valuable, if it goes the ROH route eventually, then that's probably not within 5 years. But if it's like, hey, we can't shop this to a streamer anymore, or if it's on Peacock and NBC owns it, Peacock goes down, is there interest to then pick it up? Like there's that sort of problem too. You could go through what lots of shows are dealing with, lots of talent, lots of DC stuff. I mean, look at the DC universe right now. Look at the animated part of Warner Bros, which got totally shut down.
Yeah, totally shut down. Right.
Like all that is possible because at WWE, wrestling and Raw and Smackdown and pay-per-views are the most important thing to everyone that walks in that door. And when you are absorbed in a conglomerate, you are a number on a spreadsheet, and things change that way. Like, yeah, you're going to have, if you bring in money, they'll probably be fine. But, again, I don't think that's near term, but that's like the thing that's like, it's just a crazy world to be in where we might be looking at like, hey, there might be a couple of years in a row where we're looking if Raw gets canceled in a couple of years it gets added. So yeah, not to belabor the same point, but there's big changes, good and bad, that can happen. And I think ideally the current setup is what I would choose to have a consistent wrestling product on my television screen for the next 10 to 15 years. Is it's a corporation and the creative's run by Paul Levesque and Stephanie's the CEO. Would be like the current situation is the best. And I think any other change in that is fraught from either a creative standpoint or a longevity of the long-term health of the company is all kind of up in the air if you change it.
Yeah. And the other thing too is like you have in the article, the Wall Street Journal article comments on this as well, but you have a constantly changing media environment where like, and like I said, we've talked about it on the show, we've talked about it today, like ratings and television, it's like newspapers. And I come from the newspaper business, so I know, and I'm not dragging them. I just like they're fading away, like because media is changing, and TV is going to have the same fate, and you see companies investing in streaming platforms. They're investing in collecting their own content and monetizing, their intellectual property in ways that they can leverage, so that they can be marketable to people in the that are looking for entertainment, that are choosing between Paramount Plus and HBO Max. Like, so WWE can be a huge Ryan, you're killing me. Humble. I don't know if can you humble brag about being in the newspaper industry? I'm not sure. When you look at WWE as a property for something like that, like if you're going to be, I don't know, whatever, Paramount Plus, and you're like looking to acquire essentially a reason for people to buy your streaming service, like WWE holds a lot of value. Like, will they, like, if they run Raw on if NBC of Universal buys WWE and they run Raw on Peacock, are they going to, get like 2 million people who watch Raw during the week to convert and buy it Peacock? Probably not. It probably won't be a 1-for-1 like that, but it's probably like one of the better investments you can make outside of like the NFL or a property like that, to like ensure that you're going to keep a lot of that audience whole. Because if people want to watch Raw, they're going to go find it wherever it is. So they are valuable in that way. And you got to ask, like, if you're NBC Universal, why am I paying $1 billion every 5 years when I can just pay $5 billion right now and own everything outright? I mean, it's an interesting situation. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just think I think that's obviously how it would go in the intermediate term. So intermediate being 5 to 7 years, let's say. But the reason I bring up the long-term thing is, like, I think there's, I think unfortunately the media cycle is cyclical in a lot of ways, right? In the 1800s, there's lots of newspapers, right? Each city had a bajillion newspapers. They kind of consolidate. Every city had like one major newspaper. Where you're from, Zach, there's two. There's, 2 in New York, whatever. So things proliferate and then they consolidate and then the media changes, right? That's kind of the cycle of media, at least in the last 150 years across the world. And I think we're the same thing here. There's lots of streaming services that will probably consolidate into 3 or 4. If we have 6 or 7 major ones currently, if you got Apple TV, Amazon, Hulu, Peacock, Paramount Plus, Disney Plus. Probably missing 3 just off the top, right? The Netflix. I forgot Netflix.
Netflix, yes.
So, yeah. So there's 8 just right off the dome, and then there's other ones like Crunchyroll for like anime, and there's the freebies and all that stuff, like the free content version that people are selling to. There's HBO Max, I didn't say. So like there are so many, and I think we're going to get down to 3 or 4. So the problem is long term, and I'm sure this is being had if some guy on the computer is saying it, right? That is not in a boardroom somewhere. Like if NBC Universal has Peacock and then they get absorbed 10 years from now because they are a dying property of some sort, and they get absorbed by Amazon, like does Amazon care at all about having wrestling on it? Maybe, maybe not. And then that's when you're really at a concern of
like, you're right, man. Yep.
Is this show happening? And Vince sent a press release, so let's see if we can find that. I'm sure it's the Wall Street Journal source as well. So to continue that, yeah.
Go jump in. Can you try to find that press release? We should definitely read that. First of all, thanks. While Tyler does that, thanks everybody who jumped in. This is the PWTorch Fireside Chat, January 5th. We're talking. So of course, Vince McMahon news breaks. I'm glad everybody's here, and thank you for trusting us to cover this the way that we do. Joel, Bryant, Ryan, Azan, Sean, Dr. Ross, Derek, Tracy, and everybody else who's in the chat. I appreciate you guys. Stick with us because I think there's a lot more angles we can cover this from. And at some point, maybe we'll do a little bit of the regular show. I'm not sure. Sometimes we'd have to just go where the news takes us, I guess. You know what I mean? Tracy, I got to post this. I was searching for it. Oh, to be a fly on the wall at McMahon Family Christmas. Yeah, what do you think that was like, Tyler? Like a week ago or something like
probably
that.
If I had to say, probably as cold and unloving as every other year.
True. Yeah, if anything at all, if anything happened at all. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it reminds me of those, I don't know, do it again, but those Succession scenes in the first season where they're having dinner at the table, like, it's just the worst. It's like so uncomfortable to watch, let alone have to actually be a part of. Yuck. Yuck, 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 yuck.
Okay.
All right, you got it?
All right, WWE, this is a quote from Vince. WWE has an exceptional management team in place, and I do not intend for my return to have an impact on their roles, duties, or responsibilities. So that doesn't really mean anything to me, I would say. That's pretty
whoa. You're not trusting Vince McMahon?
Yeah. And I'm reading from Sean Ross Sapp's Twitter, so to give credit to him here. He also put the editorialized note of, I've asked, this is Sean Ross Sapp speaking, I've asked WWE if this affects creative or the showrunner aspects of WWE in any way, because as we know, Vince lies, and he has not responded as of yet to that. Okay. So, but as of now, most talent are under the impression it shouldn't affect them. Again, that statement doesn't mean anything to me. And
so why not? Why not? Go into detail on that.
I mean, I'll read it again. I'll do line, but like Vince saying, it doesn't, like, it's a little bit of a word salad as I read it. Did your eyes glaze over when I was reading it? Let's see. Let me go again. WWE has an exceptional management team in place. So that could be lots of things, right? That could be the corporate management. That's not necessarily the creative team. And I do not intend for my return to have any impact on their roles, duties, or responsibilities. So, is being the head of creative different than, Triple H could essentially turn in the same work he does every week and Vince just rips it up and does what he wants to do, right? Technically, that would not affect his role and his work, right? He's basically, and that's like, from a corporate standpoint, you don't want to come in, you're not going to say like, yeah, I'm going to fire everybody and run it, because that's what he's going to do. But that's why it takes 6 months from when things break down. And, so that to me is just literally a nothing statement that you would release once you release this. And,
once this news comes out. And also, like, it's classic PR. Like, it's like, if eventually in a month's time or 6 months time, he does take over, some of the company, like, this statement doesn't hurt that. And if he never does, the statement doesn't like impact that either way. It like drives right down the middle. It can apply to both. It can apply to both outcomes.
And also, if you sell the company, then you can't guarantee anybody's role is not impacted. Like, you're gonna cut probably half the staff when you sell a company. So like, that's also either way you look at it is like, it means it's an absolute nothing burger of a statement.
I'm feeling like, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm feeling like based on that, well, I don't know, this in a week's time, you guys are going to beat me over the head and go, how naive can you possibly be, Zach? Whack. But I'm looking at this thinking like, maybe there's a chance that this is what's going on. Like, for real, that Vince McMahon is going to come back to try to sell this company. He has to be around because he owns all the shares, but the rest of the company operation will stay the same. As I talk this out, though, even if that happens, let's just say that happens and nothing changes, like, Vince McMahon's, his presence alone kind of just changes the game. Like, even if he's not in the writing room, okay, like, I'm saying this to myself almost as I break this news down. Like, even if he's not in the writer's room, his presence still looms over things that are happening in the company, and that's not around right now. I mean, there's a tone that different companies have. Like, different CEOs bring different things to, like, their companies, different personalities, different priorities, a different culture. And I think a Vince McMahon WWE culture is different, whether he's involved in creative or not. So I think I just talked myself out of my original point there, which is it'd be quite a heavy lift for Vince to just jump back in to creative, but obviously I wouldn't put it past him. But I think what's worse is just that culture changing again, like, in a matter of 5 months, 6 months. Like, that's a pretty big story.
Yeah, and I would say, like, not to crap on you. But so please let me know if I'm correct here in the comments if you are if any of you are corporate law experts. But I think Vince has to basically approve or disapprove any sale anyway without any change in his role because he's the majority shareholder. So like
Yeah.
you know, like
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I'm almost confident that that's why you have like someone who owns like a 10%, like a what's that called? It's a shareholder, like a disruptive shareholder, whatever. They want to change the company, but they own 10%. So if they sell all their stock, it tanks the company value, so their word is valuable, right? So I think when you own majority stock, you basically have to he could decline a sale per share from like a NBC Universal could buy WWE at $55 a share, and he could, as a majority shareholder, vote against that, and the sale wouldn't go through, right? So it's a little different mechanic than if he's like there and actively negotiating, which I think hurts the active negotiation, which is why it doesn't make any sense to me, because him being in the background helps an active sale more so than it helps it. So, and then if it's anything other than that, then him going to creative is just a win, not an F, I think.
Yeah. So I have I want to find the full press release here.
Well, I'll filibuster while you're looking. So
yes, okay. So this is an interesting line. I mean, the press release is really long. So
yeah,
but he says, or the press release says, quote, and this is Vince McMahon. WWE is entering a critical juncture in its history, with the upcoming media rights negotiations coinciding with increased industry-wide demand for quality content and live events, and with more companies seeking to own the intellectual property on their platforms, said Mr. McMahon. The only way for WWE to fully capitalize on this opportunity, Tyler, be ready for your jaw to hit the desk.
Okay.
The only way for WWE to fully capitalize on this opportunity is for me to return as executive chairman and support the management team in the negotiations for our media rights, and to combine that with a review of strategic alternatives. My return will allow WWE, as well as any transaction counterparts, to engage in these processes, knowing they will have the support of the controlling shareholder. So that, wow. I think that's more telling than the article, because it's like he clearly sees himself as the savior swooping in to, make the save and make sure everything gets done right. Like, that's pretty unbelievable. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, wish I could say I was surprised, but that sounds. If you were like to do that, that AI bot thing that you can generate like something for you, I'd be like, hey, give me a Vince McMahon coming out of retirement press release, and I think that's probably what it would create, something like that. So
yes. Well, I mean, it's just pretty fascinating to see how he sees himself. Like, I think that's Bruce. I bet Bruce and
Pritchard and Ben really played the long game here. They do. They're like sleeper cells. So
thrilled. Yeah. Johnny Gargano, I don't know. Where does he he's so far down on the importance anyway. I don't know, man. Like if you're Nick, I don't know. Again, guys, we didn't have time to really plan this out, these reactions. So excuse me if I'm trying to find my words, but if you're Nick Khan, are you kind of sitting there going like, man, what a damn circus this is? Like he does not need Vince McMahon to help sell WWE. Like I mean, I'm not buying that.
No. Where's he from before? Do you know off the top of your head?
He was like a talent. I believe he was
like an agent, like
a talent agent. Yeah.
I mean, he seems to like get locked in with like the group about the Suns or someone's going to buy a sports team. He just needs to like do that and like run a team like from a business standpoint or whatever. Because this is like of all the what are they, like a Fortune 1000 company, WWE, or they're on the Wrestle 2000.
I mean, 5 billion.
Yeah. So I think they're like a top 2,000 company in the United States. Like, what a just total just carny act it is all the way through, no matter what, right? And it's one of 4 companies that have co-CEOs. I think that's always been a bad sign.
Telling, yeah.
So, I mean, if you're him, like I'm probably being like, all right, I'm done with dealing with this guy. I thought I got rid of him, and I'm going somewhere else. And he's not family. He doesn't have grandkids that their grandfathers are doing this to him. They have to kind of stick around, and that's what they're only known for, right? Like if Stephanie and Paul Levesque went somewhere else, they would not be anywhere in the same stratosphere as where they are within the wrestling landscape. And Nick Khan has the ability to get out of there. So I agree. I think he's got to be pretty much, unless he's, again, been like the guy getting the seat warm for Vince the whole time and knew this was going to happen, is going to get a sweet deal of it, which you can't put past anybody in the C-suite of a giant corporation. So, I think we'll see.
And he will. I mean, if the company sells, I mean, they'll all get taken care of. Like,
yeah. So maybe you write out for that, and that's your hope for like, whatever. I kind of knew this was going to happen, and get my big payday, and then I'll go, be a minority share owner of a I don't know even where he's from originally, but he can buy into the Brooklyn Nets or something if he wants to.
What man, like it's just so ridiculous that he would say something like, I'm kind of taken aback by that, because like it's hard to say in the same sentence, hey, we've got a really good management team in place, but the only way we can leverage this company to the fullest extent if I come back and if I spearhead these negotiations. Like, I'm paraphrasing, but I mean that's just ridiculous.
Yeah. I'm sorry to be political here. I try not to, but one of his good friends in life accepted a nomination for a political office. I think the second time he did, I can't remember who, but he said, "Only I can save you" in that speech, and that feels very reminiscent of that speech. You can draw your own conclusions.
Yep. So. BFFs, those two. BFFs. All right, Tyler, we got to wrap up at some point. More to come on this story, folks, for sure. We'll have an article at PWTorch.com, detailing the news, the press release, and everything, so you can see it for yourself and read it for yourself, and that. Before we ride off into the Ryan, don't put this out there. Got an idea for ratings: Brock versus Roman.
But you got to have a spot where Roman tries to spear him, but it's through the barricade, but then it breaks the barricade.
Oh man, yeah, that would be huge. That would be huge.
I've never seen that spot. And then if Roosh come in and choke him with the cables, just do all interesting spots.
Yeah. I mean, God, that spot seems so lame considering what they did at SummerSlam. It's pretty.
Yeah, I mean, it's been lame for a long time for me, but
yeah, good point. So my next question pales in comparison to this story.
I think we can use
before
that.
I ask you, anything else on Vince?
No, I think we're good. I mean, we're going to obviously talk about this probably for the next ever until
forever.
What 77? So we got, I'd say, at least 20 more years of this content to talk about.
Oh God. My goodness gracious. Hey, you know what? I hope Vince McMahon lives another 20 fruitful years. That would be good. Just not as the head of creative in WWE.
Transparency wise, great for content for us, for me and you. So
well, sure.
So that's the positive side. So I appreciate everyone being interested in it, us talking about it. It's fun. It's kind of like a communal discussion point about something we all don't like. So that's fun.
It's fun, and it's just it's also just bizarre that this news hit as we're talking again, 5 minutes into, or whatever it was, 10 minutes in the show, maybe.
It was me all along, Austin.
Yeah. All right, more on this to come at PWTorch.com, here on YouTube. I'm sure Wade will have a ton to say about it. Go VIP, PWTorch.com/GoVIP to get Rich Fan's take, Todd Martin's take, Wade's, of course, and a host of others, I'm sure. But I do want to, before we wrap things up here, Tyler, chat a little bit about Mercedes Mone. Sasha Banks makes her debut in New Japan. I don't know what your expectation of that debut was, but for me, I know that there was a lot of people that thought it kind of just fell completely flat. I thought it went just about as it was going to go. Like, the Japanese audiences don't react the same way to stuff like that that U.S. audiences do, that American audiences do. They just don't. That's the culture of wrestling over there, and that's what makes Japanese wrestling so fun to watch, because it's different in that regard. So I didn't read much into the lack of a reaction, because generally, like, they don't pop for those kinds of things anyway. Then on top of that, you have her debuting in Japan, if she showed up at the Battle in the Valley show in San Jose, I think that pop is significantly bigger. And she wasn't having a match, and so she came back. She did business. She set up Kyrie versus herself at Battle in the Valley. New character. She looked great. The promo was a Sasha Banks promo. It's never like totally polished, but it got the job done. And now we get to see her in a ring. So I thought this checked all the boxes that I was looking for, given the expectations that I had. But where were you on that? How do you think she did? And what's her future looking like over there?
Yeah, I would say I was on the whelming. I was whelmed by it for sure. I think that's a good way to categorize it. If you were expecting anything more over there in Japan, I think that you were obviously setting yourself up for disappointment. I mean, I watched a video of Kenny making a surprise appearance, teaming with Okada at New Year's Dash, the event the day after Wrestle Kingdom, and like the video from the crowd, there's like one person going,
right.
And that's like that person's going insane. Like they're probably getting like, look at this crazy guy. He needs to chill out.
Yes.
Right, that's like the culture over there, especially the last 2 years where literally you were only allowed to clap, and everyone had to be masked and everything. So, if you think that, then it is what it is. I think it's more of a legacy thing. Like, hey, my first appearance outside of WWE was in the Tokyo Dome. Like, that's kind of what the plan was, not to show up in the San Jose Civic Center, wherever that's going to be. Or to show up, the Forum would be another good place, but like, literally at Wrestle Kingdom, you're one of the first women's segments on that show since it's been called Wrestle Kingdom, right? The last time it was just a January 4th show or whatever they called it back then before it got rebranded as Wrestle Kingdom. So all that is like a legacy play, I think, by her. But like the look, her hair, all that stuff is like still polished, and I think top tier wrestling star related. And I think all that's fine. It's more about does she do the Stardom thing only, and then I think AEW, the thing on next week, which we didn't even project, but I think she's certainly showing up at AEW, and that's all, a tiered plan. It's very much similar to the Jon Moxley, like he wrestled in New Japan before he wrestled. No, he premiered in AEW, but then he like quickly wrestled in New Japan. He wrestled in New Japan before he premiered. I think he wrestled in New Japan because I remember like watching it was such a big deal. It's his first match outside of WWE.
I'm trying to think. He wrestled in New Japan before he wrestled in AEW.
Yeah, before he even premiered, right? In AEW.
Yeah, before. I think before.
That's the same trajectory, right?
Same thing.
That's like a big star moving. I think it's a good bridge. So that's kind of where I am. And if she does both, like, hey, she's going to be a special attraction in AEW and work some Stardom dates. Like, I think it's all fine. The name too is like, it's kind of cheesy. Mercedes Mone. I think her regular name is totally fine, but I think she's protecting her actual self versus a character in wrestling. So that's fine. But I don't know. It's a little like 90s, like pop name, maybe it's what she's going for. I don't know. But like, that sounds like someone that would like have a one-hit wonder in 1996, Mercedes Mone. So.
Yeah. And I mean, it was a little debut, like I think the bigger thing is February 18th, to be honest. Like that's her first match outside WWE. I'm assuming she's going to be in one of the top matches, if not the top match on the show.
I think she'll probably have a match on January 11th, but do you not think
January 11th? Yeah, true. Although there was news reports today that refuted that outright.
Wait, so she was going back to WWE, so I think that's totally off the table too with Vince.
Well, not right. So nobody knows. Although,
and that was Dave. That was Dave versus Sean Ross Sapp too. They're both conflicting on that report. So
yes, they were
to tally the two. Usually, big names in the leaking space are not going up against each other. So just keep an eye on that one.
Yeah, they're not, and I mean, that would be the ultimate. Like, if she decided to go back to WWE, and like that's worse than Regal. That is worse than Regal for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, man. Well, hey, a good day, another fun day at the office here. Like, great, good conversation, everybody. Thank you guys for joining us. For anybody new that popped in, glad you did, and hopefully you stick around. We're on Thursdays with the flagship edition of the Fireside Chat every single Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern, and we're live all throughout the week as well with Raw previews and AEW Dynamite previews, interviews, and a host of other cool stuff. So very much appreciate you guys, taking your time to kind of wade through this news with us. There's a lot of places to go, and glad you chose us here. Tyler, thanks, man. Any final words?
No, I think I'm just gonna unravel. So keep it here. Hit that bell notification. I think we'll definitely, if it's not both of us, we'll tag team and get, if there's some big news happens tomorrow, which I think could be a possibility. Like this vote happens officially, and Vince is CEO as of tomorrow at 4:00 when the trading day's over. Then we'll pop on here, or I'll pop on, you'll pop on. Somebody will pop on, and we'll continue the discussion. But I think this is going to be an ongoing news story. Keep it locked here to get all your analysis and feedback on it.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thanks very much. We'll catch you guys next time. Appreciate it. See you.